All right, so everybody, look me in the eyes and bear with me, all right? Because this one's a roller coaster. What we are looking at here is a 3 versus 3 tournament, not quite conquest, but a little bit conquest. All right, bear with me. So each team has brought 5 decks, and in those decks, they are allowed to overlap each region one time, but they are not allowed to play the same regional composition twice. For example, you can play Freljord twice, but you can't bring 2 Freljord Shadow Isle decks. Each team has to play each player within the first 3 games, and then for games 4 and 5, if it comes to that, you can play any players that you want, but you can't have the same player play games 4 and 5. So everybody gets to play. One person gets to play once, 2 people get to play twice if you are going to a game 5. Once you win with a deck, your team is not allowed to play it anymore. If you have lost with a deck, any other teammate can go ahead and pick it up. Once you have won with 3 of your decks, then you are declared the winner of the match. And because this is an invitational, they are straight away into the top 8, so this will be a single elimination event. All right, so this is where the changing of deck lists from top 8 into top 4 changes out. As far as I remember, everybody brought LuxSol in the top 8. Now it looks like we are going to have that Mobilized Dragons list, unless, we are playing Mobilize in our LuxSol deck, which I don't think is the case. I'm pretty sure this is going to be the Dragons deck.
Listen, if we start seeing... oh, wait, no, there's Mobilize right there.
Yeah, that's why it kind of, sticks out to me.
Whoa, okay, wait. So we are actually seeing Mobilize. So... unfortunately, we mentioned this yesterday. We do not have access to the deck list for this, so I think we did see Runetelling play on day 1, I think, and we saw this deck. We just didn't see the Mobilize come out, and I'm very curious to see how this works.
I'm pretty sure he was playing LuxSol day 1.
Okay, I know most people were. I mean, pretty much, I'd say all but like 3
people. I think
people.
everyone was.
So that was the very heavily represented deck archetype.
So here's the question, and this is where Mobilize always gets a little awkward. If you Mobilize now, you're getting the value onto 5 units, and you will be able to play either the Fused Firebrand or the Screeching Dragon next turn, but your opponent's not doing anything. Do you continue to sit and get as much value out of this Mobilize as possible? Although it looks like Frozen Winter has sort of... I don't know. I feel like Frozen Winter is the only person on his team that wants to play this Draven Ezreal deck. He played it yesterday. He forced his team to bring it again, and will be whipping it out here in game number 1.
I mean, it won yesterday, right? So I'm very curious to see if it's able to pick up some victories again today. So one thing I want to mention with Mobilize, though, is, and I feel like we're going to be talking about this card a little bit in this matchup, because we do not ever see this card. I feel like just from a straight value perspective, you do want to get it down on at least 3 units, right? Just to get that 3 mana reduction. We actually don't see it come out yet on the side of Runetelling, which strikes me as odd having the spell mana banked. So we'll see when he is actually able to get this Mobilize off.
I'm guessing that he wants to get a little bit more value onto the higher sort of cost targets. Getting it down onto the Herald of the Dragons doesn't really feel like you've accomplished anything, especially since that card is going to have a hard time surviving into an Ezreal deck. I wouldn't be surprised if that pretty much never comes down. Oh, actually, we are going to throw out the Mobilize now. A little bit of mana inefficiency on the side of Runetelling, playing his Solari Soldier, then playing the Mobilize, but hey,
Well, I mean, and I was going to say this actually before he played the Mobilize. I mean, so he just seems like he's valuing that Daybreak effect more than getting the cost reduction, which, I mean, I guess you could argue one way or the other. It does push through the 3 damage because the Draven obviously cannot block it at that point. So we'll see if that damage comes up as being important a little bit later on.
So how do you feel about this Dragon deck? Because I had brought it up to the other casters a little bit earlier this week because I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but it is sort of the deck that made me confront Mobilize as a card and made me really form a concrete opinion on that. And then we saw it completely go to the wayside in favor of the LuxSol. Why do you think Runetelling's team has made the adaptation to bring this out in top 4 after they got here off the back of LuxSol?
So I saw some of that conversation going back and forth, and I got to agree that it's like, so generally speaking, I don't feel like it's a great strategy, but it can high roll. And I think there was a few people that did mention that, yeah, if you get Mobilized like we just saw in an early hand, getting it on multiple units, even on something like Aurelion Sol now being able to come out on turn 9, that might be, an advantage that will actually put that deck over the edge to give it a victory. But I don't know. I feel like this adaptation too, because the Mobilized decks that I'm thinking of with the Dragons kind of went all in on let's just play a lot of larger dragons really early. And instead, this version it's just kind of going for the Aurelion Sol strategy. So I'm curious to see if getting the Soul out early is going to be enough to really push this deck forward.
Looks like he's going to have a hard time dealing with the wide board that Frozen Winter has presented, though. That's sort of been my problem with the deck. Sure, you have these cool Screeching Dragons, and there's usually Laurent Proteges in the deck as well. Just a lot of challengers to continue to pick off the board, but he's only got one in hand. And outside of that, in the single combat, we'll have a tough time dealing with the Ezreal. It's going to be a matter of can Frozen Winter get that single combat out of Runetelling before the Ezreal comes down. But even then, I'm not sure you're ever really in a position where you're going to feel safe playing that card because there is something like the Screeching Dragon that could come down after the fact. And realistically, the Mystic Shot that you generate is not going to get a lot done. But I do think you want to go as wide as possible.
Yeah, and I got to agree. Mystic Shot doesn't do a whole lot here. You have very large dragons now hitting the board. We see the Static Shock basically just being played from the looks of it just to pop this Spell Shield here, but really not doing too much to impact the board. We do see a lot of chump blockers on the side of Frozen Winter, so maybe that kind of just gives him enough time to make it to the a few rounds from now. The problem with the chump blockers is Fury is going to come in huge versus these chump blockers here. These dragons are just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, eating up these spiders and the Zonai Urchin.
Frozen Winter has a really good shot at dealing with all of this, though. He could Static Shock right now to kill the Screeching Dragon when it runs into the Draven. He could block this Fused Firebrand with the Zonite Urchin and then Thermo Beam it after the fact. And I honestly, this Noxian Guillotine that is all the way to the left of Frozen Winter's hand, keep your eye on that card because that's going to be able to get a lot of value later on. That card is a mid-range destroyer.
Yeah, I mean, as much as these dragons are going to grow with Fury here, eating up these spiders, they will still be damaged. And the Noxian Guillotine will be able to get rid of most of the board on the side of Runetelling. So we'll see if that's able to get some work done the next couple of turns. This is the next Static Shock coming out, further putting damage in. So he's not even actually going to offer up the chump blocker. So I do think going into turn 6 here, we might just see double Noxian Guillotine come out.
Yeah, I mean, the guillotine's so insane. This is like one of the situations where there's an argument for which is better, Fury or Tough. Guillotine makes it so that Tough is unilaterally better. Just the fact that even if you are getting bigger off the Fury, even if you kill a 1-1, you are still a damaged unit. And now we see this kill coming down onto the Screeching Dragon, and while Runetelling does have the single combat, there's no value to really get out of it unless you want to throw the Fused Firebrand single combat into the Draven.
Yeah, and I got to agree. I think generally speaking, Tough is a better keyword, but what I will say is we don't actually, I mean, we're seeing it now because of this Ezreal Draven deck, which has just came out of nowhere. We haven't really seen a lot of lately. Noxian Guillotine is not a heavily played card. It's rarely played in, Swain TF. And obviously it is played in Ezreal Draven, but we haven't really seen any Ezreal Draven as of late. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's kind of why Fury has been able to find a place in a deck like we're seeing from Runetelling here. But in this matchup in particular, Fury is not going to help out, like you mentioned.
I feel like Guillotine was really popular at the start of the format, and then as the Targon decks got a little more refined and pretty much all of them ended up playing Star Shaping and Guiding Touch, you were getting blown out by these situations where you would go for a Guillotine onto something like an Aurelion Soul, and then a Star Shaping would just heal it back up to full. Yeah. And we kind of saw the card fall to the wayside, although I believe last night at Giant Slayer TV's Fight Night, Type V actually did pick up the win with 2 copies of Noxian Guillotine in a Twisted Fate Swain deck.
Oh, really? He was playing 2 in a TF Swain. All right.
If I remember correctly. I know somebody was playing 2 Guillotine in a TF Swain. I believe it was the winner.
All right. Well, then maybe it is actually making a comeback then as far as that card is concerned. You did mention Star Shaping with something like Healing Aurelion Soul. I do like how Star Shaping now moving forward, and even Guiding Touch for that matter, I feel like people are much more aware of healing units now. We always used to talk about that previously on very other fringe cards that could heal units that just, it didn't seem like they were ever really used for that exact use. But now with Star Shaping and something like Aurelion Soul and Guiding Touch, things of that nature, we are seeing these come in clutch a lot of the time, being able to save units from things like Noxian Guillotine.
Yeah, I think the only time it really ever came up was in Karma Ezreal decks that were running Vi. The health potion down onto the Vi could get a lot of value, or in Karma Lux health pot onto Radiant Guardian, which really has fallen to the wayside. Ionia seems to be one of the biggest victims of the new set, honestly. It's one of the regions that we're seeing cut the most unless you're playing Karma Ezreal. But yeah, I don't even remember if we've seen pretty much any Ionia this tournament so far.
What's Ionia?
A question we all would have loved to ask 6 months ago.
You know what's disappointing? Well, actually, all right, let's just put it this way. It makes me feel a little bit better about Yasuo being bad because now it just kind of feels like the region itself isn't that great.
We all asked for
I
this. This is our just desserts.
I know, right? You know what this is? Yeah, this is because everybody complained about Deny for so long, and now they're like, nah, all right, you know what? You guys didn't like Deny. Well, how about just not liking Ionia? Period. Okay.
So we are going to see the White Flame Protector come down. I knew that these dragon names were going to trip me up when the set came out, and I was trying to like memorize the set so that I can cast effectively. And I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on them because, I mean, realistically, there's only 3 of them. I thought there were going to be a lot more.
All right, well, thank God you have a grasp on them because I know the names, but they're all just this giant dragon merged into one picture at this point. So
To be fair, they don't do anything, and that's the problem that I've always had with the dragon archetype. Until we get Shyvana, ideally on the next expansion of Call of the Mountain, I really don't like this because at the end of the day, you're playing vanilla units. White Flame Protector doesn't do anything. It's just a keyword card. Same thing with the Fused Firebrand. Spell Shield and Fury is cool, but outside of that, if my unit isn't getting inherent immediate value or isn't going to be able to have immediate impact on the board, like something like a Radiant Guardian that not only has the tough keyword but can also gain me back a bit of life, I just feel like it's not the most effective deck that I could be bringing to a tournament like this.
and we do see the Invoke coming up here, so we'll see what ends up getting chosen by Frozen Winter. We do see is the 8 cost? See, it looks very similar to Supernova. So speaking of card names, is that Cosmic Rays? Cosmic Radiate.
Yes.
Oh, wow! Got him. All right, that's what I.
Look at you.
Yeah, look at that.
I really like the cosmic inspiration here. The problem is that you do have to behold another Celestial in order to actually activate that card.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The ones that do say that you need to behold a Celestial card, it's actually a little bit more difficult than you'd think. Because if that's the first Celestial you're getting early on in the game, you will not be able to use that card, and it just kind of turns into a dead card in your hand for a little while. But going with the Great Beyond there on the side of Runetelling with the Celestial pick.
So it looks like Frozen Winter is going to swing out, and this is risky because what you're really looking for is for Runetelling to go ahead and block with that Aurelion Soul so that you can get the double Noxian Guillotine down onto it before it sort of levels up and gets you those 0-cost Great Beyonds that we do see in Runetelling's hand already. But if you don't attack with enough units, you just lose your board to everything that isn't the Aurelion Soul, and then you have to use your removal to pick off the other units, stop the A-Soul level, but then you're still eating 10 damage from the A-Soul on the next turn.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like the greatest attack here. We'll see how the blocks end up getting lined up from Runetelling. We do see... looks like I don't see a reason not to line up that block there on the spider. You also get the Fury, additional +1/+1 on top of that. I feel like there's a lot he could do. Again, though, probably being wary of the Noxian Guillotine because if these blocks are lined up, that's a lot of free damage that Frozen Winter is going to get onto many of these units.
Yeah, he's really just trying to figure out how to balance out his board so that he doesn't take a lot of unnecessary damage, but still gets to very safely level the Aurelion Soul. Because an Ezreal deck with 8 mana left over can do a lot of damage to your board. And with these blocks lined up, I think that Frozen Winter is actually in a position to stop the Aurelion Soul level with a Get Excited onto the Fused Firebrand, followed by a Thermogenic Beam onto that Radiant Guardian. Or sorry, Get Excited onto the White Flame Protector, not Fused Firebrand.
Yeah, so I do think that we'll be able to prevent the Aurelion Soul level up, at least for now. Looks like he's going with the Get Excited to remove the dragon here. And I think it's only going to leave him with 5 mana. It's really awkward being at 8 mana this turn, not being able to get 2 activations of this Noxian Guillotine. So I'm curious to see how he does end up removing another unit, probably a Thermo Beam onto something like that Radiant Guardian. So we'll see how this resolves here. Obviously, we see that a single combat could, if he single combats, I'm just doing some quick math here, that's 3. No, the dragon still dies. Okay, never mind. I was going to say if he single combats the Zonite Urchin, does it somehow live with the Fury, but Zonite doing 2 damage would not work.
Yeah, I mean, you could single combat your Fused Firebrand into the Spiderling, and that would protect it. It's more of a matter of how afraid are you of the Thermogenic Beam? And the answer should have been very afraid, apparently, as now I think we're going to see the single combat actually come out from the Aurelion Soul or the Fused Firebrand to still get the Aurelion Soul level. Putting your opponent at 19 is not going to be quite enough. Thanks to the Fury effect, we'll be able to get back up to 20 stats on board. And personally, I think I would go for it.
Wow, okay, so just gonna go ahead and use the 0 mana Thermo Beam on the spell shield. This is the first time I've seen that, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that it does still proc the spell shield. I guess it's still targeting the unit, doing 0 damage. 0 is still a number, technically. So yeah, it does actually get rid of the spell shield there on the Aurelion Soul, which is definitely a big deal.
Okay, and we actually don't use the single combat, so we are not going to get the leveled Aurelion Soul, so we are going to have to pay full price for any of these Celestials we want to throw down this turn. Either the Great Beyond or the Destroyer. Had to check my notes for that one.
Yeah, no.
I think we had this conversation yesterday where once they get to 7 and up, they all just kind of meld together as these celestial beings where the names don't really match up with the pictures anymore.
Yeah, even the pictures just look like giant blobs of like purple goo. So but yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Destroyer at that's the 10 cost. Great Beyond is 9 cost. What 8 and 7? Pop quiz.
8 is the Immortal Fire because that one's actually
bird,
a Phoenix. And then 10 is the Scourge, which I only remember because its name should be Baron Nashor, but instead it's the Scourge. So I just kind of remember that because I don't feel like that should be its name.
Sorry, so 7 is the Destroyer, right?
7 is, yeah, or sorry, yeah, 7's the Destroyer, 10's the Scourge. Yeah, we got it.
Give us like 2 more weeks and we'll be on point with every single name. And by then they'll be releasing the new set of cards out, so it's going to be more that we have to study. But for now, we do see the Great Beyond attacking here. With that elusive tag, still having the spell shield as well. I don't imagine we see something like a block from this Ezreal, so looks like we're just going to be eating 9 damage on the side of Frozen Winter, I should say. Not really much. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything in his hand that can actually kill it. So we're just going to probably have to be chump blocking this Aurelion Soul, possibly set it up for something like a guillotine.
And now we get into the question of, are we going to be able to actually end the game on the side of Frozen Winter? Typically, these Demacia Dragon decks don't play Hush, so that probably isn't a top deck out that Runetelling can play for to turn off the Ezreal and try and go for a big attack on the following turn again. But I do think that you need to... Yeah, not attacking with the Aurelion Soul is really smart. Noxian Guillotine is the best way for Frozen Winter to currently push damage. Because in the meantime, his hand's not looking great. This Culling Strike, I'd probably rather discard it to the Rummage than actually play it at this point.
Yeah, there is this single combat, though, on the side of Runetelling, right? I mean, it's very great removal right now for this Ezreal on the side of Frozen Winter if he does decide to, try to go off and deal a little bit of burst damage with Ezreal's level 2 effect there. It looks like he's considering the Rummage right now. Could actually... No, I mean, Rummage probably seems like the real only option right now with that Aurelion Soul not having attacked. You can't really chump it down and use that Guillotine. And I think that's a kind of a heads-up play on the side of Runetelling, knowing that, okay, my Aurelion Soul doesn't have a spell shield right now. I can't really afford it to be, in range of being targeted by anything, let alone a Noxian Guillotine.
Yeah, and when does this single combat actually come out from Runetelling? You generally want to play it in response to an amount of fast spells so that your opponent doesn't get the free damage off, but what unit on Runetelling's side of the field is he targeting with the single combat? Because if you push damage onto your Aurelion Soul or your Great Beyond, they get into range of that Noxian Guillotine, and your Fused Firebrand is currently sitting in a range where it is vulnerable to something like this Ravenous Flock.
I think you do it on your Great Beyond, right? You do it on the Great Beyond. It still has the spell shield associated with it, so it's not... it's not like he will be able to use the Noxian Guillotine right away. But I definitely, no way on the Aurelion Soul. I do think you need the Aurelion Soul to stick around here. Looks like the Ravenous Flock, though, going to come out on the Fused Firebrand, getting rid of some of that attack, but still 20 on the side of Runetelling. So this Aurelion Soul looking to level up here at the end of the turn, unless we see this Mystic Shot peg this 1-1.
I think at this point, you kind of just have to let the Aurelion Soul level. I think you're at a point where you are a little more solitaire on how things are going to play from here on out, where you just need to play your own game plan, kind of ignore what your opponent's doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is pretty... Wow, okay. I was going to say, I think this is a pretty easy just single combat from Runetelling just to kill the Ezreal now while your opponent doesn't really have any more mana. And it looks like... so he is going to go ahead and let this Aurelion Soul level up here. And just before we disconnected, I did see this beautiful Progress Day get drawn here, which there it is. And that's why I was just saying I don't know if it was correct for Runetelling to not just play that single combat last turn when he had the chance. Instead, going to give Frozen Winter, plenty of mana to do things now.
Yeah, this is sort of the play that I was going to be worried about too, is just an open attack from everything except the Ezreal on the side of Frozen Winter. Either pushes a lot of damage or sets up a lot of things for Inoxian Guillotine, though I'm not sure why we're setting up a progress day on our attack. I think it would have been fine to kind of wait and see what we got. Maybe we're thinking, oh, I'll go in with the Ezreal if I draw another Ezreal off this progress day, but now you're not threatening the double Guillotine for the turn.
Yeah, and you know, like you never really want to, as like a rule of thumb, right? You never want to go into a turn like that and be down, like you're on 5 mana, your opponent's on 13. Like that just feels like, I feel bad just talking about that. Like it just doesn't feel good when you're that much behind in mana. Your opponent now has a lot more options to play out the turn than you do, and they know that you only have a limited amount of options being at 5 mana.
We do have quite a bit of burn on the side of Frozen Winter, but this little dance back and forth that we've seen so far out of these players is, hey, I know that you have single combat. You need to play that in response to a fast spell, so I'm not going to proactively use those. I'm going to leave my mana up, because if we do see a proactive single combat out of Runetelling here, he actually just loses the game to the Mystic Shot, Get Excited, and Spinning Axe.
Yeah.
But now with the Radiant Guardian down, the onus of priority is going to be on Frozen Winter, because you have to do something about these attacks next turn. Runetelling has put himself into the position where Frozen Winter has to blink first.
Yeah, I really wish we saw that single combat come out a little while ago when he had a much better opportunity to do so. But instead now, this is looking like Frozen Winter just has this in the bag. Like we see just without the Ezreal on board, we actually have 6 damage in hand. You know.
I'm pretty sure Frozen Winter loses here.
You think he lose?
Yeah, so we go into Runetelling's turn. Runetelling open attacks, and then you have to play your spells, and then I single combat my Radiant Guardian into your Ezreal.
Oh, okay. So you're. Okay, if you're thinking that he plays a single combat this turn or next turn?
Next turn, after, because Frozen Winter has to try to kill me in response to my attacks. So that's when I play the single combat.
Okay,
Once all of his burn is on the stack, yeah.
Okay. You're saying if he manages to play the single combat after all the burn spells are played.
Which I think he's going to be able to do.
Well, he does have. I mean, he has 2 with the axe, no matter what. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's 2 short right now. If he does draw a burst spell, he would still be able to take it home. Okay,
but
if there's
the
no
Radiant Guardian's going to gain 5 life in response to all the burn spells.
Yep.
And okay, so there actually is a Hush in the deck. Yeah, we had talked a little earlier about how we didn't typically see Hush in this deck, but that totally takes the win off the table for Frozen Winter.
Yeah, and Hush, I'm so happy to see something like Hush in the game now. It does this. It does exactly what we're seeing here. It shuts off Ezreal, and for a card that a lot of people have talked about for so long, in Ezreal just being very overpowered, it's just so good to see a card like that.
So we're going to have Frostbite mid-range versus the Lux Leona Azul. Do we have an opinion on the Leona in this Lux Azul deck yet?
Not really. At the very least, what I will say is, being a 4-drop, she can't come down much earlier than some of the other champions like a Lux, and that stun a lot of times can shut down some pretty big attack turns on the side of things like mid-range Frostbite, which we see here, or some of the more aggressive decks, which, I mean, this Aurelion Sol generally has a pretty good matchup against aggressive decks anyways, with the amount of heal, like things like guiding touch, and star shaping and stuff. But hey, you know what? It can't hurt to have some more stun action in there, and it seems like Leona fits nicely to just kind of curve out the deck and give it a little bit more options early on in the game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I have a whole lot to say on it yet. It hasn't really impressed me. The stun hasn't seemed super relevant, especially as much as additional copies of Lux and Aurelion Sol. And the one thing that really worries me about it in any deck that's playing Solari Priestess is it feels like it really deludes your Written in the Stars, because I never want to grab a Leona with that. I don't care to have a 3. It sounds weird, but I don't care to have a 3-mana 5/7.
Yeah, it sounds like a bad card.
I want my Lux and I want my Aurelion Sol.
I mean,
and maybe if my worst case scenario is a 3-mana 5/7 that stuns a unit, that's not bad.
Yeah.
It's just not Lux.
One thing I will mention is, I don't really think we've seen her. I think we saw her level up once in these, Leona, Lux, Azul decks over the last couple of days here, and I mean, I know that's not necessarily the goal per se in this deck to level her up, but she feels underwhelming. Like you said, the stun really hasn't been super impactful. She feels underwhelming if she's not leveled up, because otherwise, yeah, she's just a glorified stun. Like, she's just this unit. It's like a arachnoid sentry that's just a little bit better, I guess, stats wise.
Yeah, I think unless we see Soldier into Shield Bearer into Priestess into Leona, we actually really haven't seen her level. And I mean, on the hand of Magic Park, we're probably not going to see her level. This is just a pretty brick hand if we're being honest with ourselves. You know, you do have the Guiding Touch to cycle a little bit, but you know, these early units, as cool as the Solaris are, they don't actually get a whole lot of value outside of the stats that they provide. You know, the card advantage is going to be nice, but once it all is said and done, it's not the Daybreak turn anymore. We see that Soldier down to a 2/2. This now Shield Bearer going to become a 3/2, and that there's a couple of options for Jinbae on how to pick this one off. I do want to see how this Yeti plays out, though, because we were talking about how we've only seen the Yeti version of Frostbite
Yeah.
midrange out of Korea so far. And I mean, we have seen the Yetis drawn extremely late. Now that we do have one in the opening hand, how much of an impact can it have on the game?
Yeah, and I think so. This Yeti is actually drawn early here, right? So previously, like you said, we've seen the Yeti. We just haven't actually seen it drawn early in the game. So I am curious to see maybe 2 turns from now, when the tempo is probably going to be pretty high on the side of Jinbae. We'll see what kind of field on turn 5, his next attack turn, he's going to have to kind of go in for kind of a big swing. We do see the Glory Seeker pop down for now anyways. No real way to combo any sort of Frostbite to get rid of the Shield Bearer for the time being anyways. We will probably see Ashe come down next turn possibly, and then that'll go into, like I said, a turn 5 where an Ashe with the Glory Seeker going in for an attack obviously always feels good. Not to mention possibly getting a Yeti for, at that point, it will be 3 cost for a 5/5 overwhelm.
And it looks like he has just decided, you know what, the Shield Bearer can go ahead and die to the Glory Seeker. I have a second Glory Seeker. I'm not super worried about setting up the Ashe combo with it. This isn't a matchup where it necessarily gets a lot of value. I'm kind of eyeing this Hush out of Magic Park and trying to figure out, does that get any value in this matchup other than sort of hushing my own units to take the Frostbite off of them? And I feel like the answer is probably going to be no.
I have to agree with you there. We'll see what happens, though, in the next couple of turns. We are back on over to Magic Park here. Not a whole lot he can do this turn. Guiding Touch, I know one of your favorite cards, Boulevard. So we can't even really play that because it's not getting value as far as the heal is concerned. So I think you just pass back over, and yeah, Magic Park agrees.
Yeah, I think you just want to save this Sunburst for something big this turn, like the Ashe out of Jinbae. I think if he does throw down this Ashe, I'm pretty inclined to throw down this Sunburst. I really don't want to float this turn. I don't want to fall this behind on board, and I think that this is about as good as this is going to get. That is sort of the prime target. Maybe a Sejuani is something I'd like to hit, but definitely want to keep those Trifarian Assessors under control.
I think Sejuani is just about the only better target than Ashe at this point, and this early on as well, on turn 4, being able to remove the Ashe on curve like this, I think is pretty impactful, because it will, like I was saying, heading into that turn 5, we're maybe expecting to see a pretty big swing out of Jinbae, but now on the side of Magic Park, removing that Ashe and having that Glory Seeker having challenged the Shield Bearer, not a real whole lot of aggression, but we do see the Yeti come down, so let's see how much work this bad boy can do.
I think, yeah, you can even throw down the Glory Seeker this turn as well and go for a possible just 11 attack turn. There's no units on the side of Magic Park. If there were, you probably would have seen them come down a little bit earlier. But yeah, I think that if Jinbae smells the blood in the water, it's pretty... I don't see a reason for him not to play the Glory Seeker. If your opponent does get down a unit, then you can kind of decide from there, okay, is this something I want to challenge or is it not? And even if, Magic Park was loaded up on things like Radiant Guardian, he probably has to throw down like a naked Radiant Guardian here, and then you get a lot... Oh, there's the Radiant Guardian just a turn too late, and that does mean 11 damage. It's probably going to come out here. And this is why I hate Guiding Touch.
Yeah. What do you mean? It looks so useful here. And you know what? Like, yeah, we know Boulevard. You hate him. I I don't know. Do you ever argue? I know this is really like a minor thing, right? Like he only would have gained one more health out of it, but I feel like knowing that you can't do anything, you just pass back over and wait for the attack to come through just to gain the extra health, right?
I think it would have looked like the biggest brain play in the world if he top decked a shield bearer there.
Okay, that definitely would have been nice. With Guiding Touch being burst, he would have been able to get that down in the same turn too. So, but no shield bearer, instead 11 damage to the face. And so I mentioned turn 5 earlier. Even with removing the Ash and having that other Glory Seeker trade with that shield bearer earlier on, we still see a huge swing, and the Yeti coming in clutch here. We wondered, is this Yeti going to do anything? And right now it seems to be pretty freaking impactful.
Even the Solari Soldier off the top would have been good because you could have paired it with the Pale Cascade to actually kill the Yeti if it wasn't challenged by a Glory Seeker. But now we are going to see this Trifarian Assessor come down, and I feel like Magic Park has to go for something like an attack with this Soldier into the Radiant Guardian, and then kind of go from there with this single combat, try to get his life total back up, try to pick some things off the board. But I think that this Ashe could just be lethal on the next turn. It takes the Judgment off the table. We'll see how it plays out. And it looks like he is going to go in for this Solari Soldier attack. If you Pale Cascade, you don't have single combat this turn.
Now, refresh my memory, Boulevard. How
Yeah.
good was Judgment in the games that we've seen previously?
Oh, it's been poo-poo useless.
It's pretty much lived up to its reputation as to why people do not play this card. And, even seeing it now, it kind of just seems like a dead card. Like, sure, in a perfect situation, you get Radiant Guardian down, you get Judgment down, and you block and kill their whole field. But as long as your opponent is aware of the existence of the card, I feel like that is not something that's going to be able to happen anytime soon.
And speaking of being aware of the existence, Jinbae doesn't block, says, actually, I'm pretty sure you've got a Radiant Guardian. I would love for you to not get that down. And that's going to force a really awkward single combat out of Magic Park to try and get this one online. He will have mana for the Judgment next turn, but if we start off with either an Ashe or a Iceveil Archer, then that Judgment isn't going to do anything. You don't have the mana for Hush and Judgment in order to get that back up to the 5 attack. I'm pretty sure Jinbae's just going to take a 2-0 lead here.
Yeah, this is just going to be game. I mean, if he does Brittle Steel this, it's going to give the Glory Seeker a chance to go in for the attack and pull the Radiant Guardian all the way to right or left, not really sure, but all the way to the side that hits last on the side of Jinbae, which means, yeah, that's just going to be game, and we can see what's in the hand of Magic Park, and it's a whole lot of nothing. Once again, an 8-cost Judgment, sitting in hand, chilling, not doing much. I think the problem in this deck, too, inherently with Judgment, is this deck already has, things like Aurelion Sol, later game cards that aren't really impactful until, you have your combo of Lux and stuff set up on the field, or you have Asol leveled up. And putting another card in there that's that high of a cost with a very specific kind of activating condition, it just is just asking to be dead in your hand for most games. So we'll see the Pale Cascade come out here, though, in response to the Brittle Steel played on the side of Jinbae. It will actually still trade with this Glory Seeker.
And that means that the Radiant Guardian can't come down this turn, and now you're just dead to the open attack. I think that Magic Park was looking for a healing spell here, maybe running the numbers in his head saying, even if I do get down the Radiant Guardian, if I don't kill this Glory Seeker, the chances of me winning are pretty low. I don't think this Judgment is actually going to be able to resolve. I would need something like a single combat or Concerted Strike, but that's typically why we see these combat-centric removal Demacia decks fall prey to the Frostbite midrange. Your Concerted Strike, single combats, and Judgments don't do anything when your units don't have any attack points. And this open attack from Jinbae will be lethal. Even if he wants to develop a little bit more, there's still nothing impactful going to come out of Magic Park.
Yeah, and I will say I do like that play on the side of Magic Park, realizing that he just needs to draw heal at that point. But it does look like the open attack here is enough to do it. I mean, we see it on our side, whether or not... Okay, yeah, it does look like Jinbae is just going to go in for the attack, so... I was going to say whether or not Jinbae realizes that and decides to go in is a whole other story, but we see absolutely nothing that can be played in response on the side of Magic Park. Hush isn't going to do a whole lot, and game 2 here going to be taken by Jinbae once this attack goes through. And yeah, so like I said, in Scouts versus, is this another Another one. Another Lux Aurelian Soul coming in hot. Wow. This is the deck of Korea, huh?
It looks like it's actually the same Lux Asol deck. They have swapped JO1's team up to the top.
Oh, okay. I see. I see. So Shanghai's on the bottom. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And we will see the Cithria drawn on curve, though. So always a good start when you're playing Scouts to get that 2/2 out on turn 1. It's got to be, for such a not impactful card, it's pretty impactful, if that makes sense. Like, it's not, the card itself is not great, but in this specific strategy, playing Scouts, it is absolutely of the utmost importance to get tempo ahead of your opponent and get something down like a 2/2 early on.
Yeah, it's, we'll have to track a little bit later on turn 9. What are you top decking? Is it still copies of Cithria of Cloudfield?
But he draws
Even this one feels a little awkward. I mean, like, turn 3 is Misfortune's turn. Then on turn 4 and potentially even turn 5, we're just kind of sitting on our hands, not doing anything. And you're certainly not going to be able to do anything about this Remembrance.
Yeah, and so one of the downsides of the deck is when it doesn't draw on curve. So we did see the curve on turn 1, but no War Chefs or anything similar on turn 2. And that essentially nullifies drawing the Cithria on turn 1. There's not really much we can do with this now.
Well, I mean, we can riposte when the Screeching Dragon challenges.
Okay, all right. That's a consolation prize. It's not the end of the world, but still not great. And we do actually... All right, so that's not bad, drawing the Grizzled Ranger there at least. So we'll see if the Ranger comes down or the MF on this turn. We could do the MF and the Cithria, but that would not give us enough mana for the repost, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, if you go for the MF, then you have the repost available. The sort of awkward part is that you have to repost to kill the dragon anyway. Like, you have to not proactively do it, because if you proactively do it, JO1's just not going to block. So you do have to wait for the dragon to line up onto the Cithria. And maybe that's sort of the consideration is I go in for the attack. If my opponent doesn't block with this dragon, then I just get a little bit of free damage. Otherwise, I use the riposte to kill it. But we know that JO1 has a read on the riposte by the fact that, Shanghigh floated turn 3. JO1 didn't go in for the attack. He was like, okay, you've definitely got that. Now that I have that read, how do I play around it? The answer is waiting until I have Concerted Strike mana.
Yeah, in this particular matchup, too, that is not very good whatsoever on the side of Shanghai for him to have floated turn 3 like that. I mean, that is wasted mana that in this particular deck, the Scout deck, the first, 6 or 7 turns are crucial in developing on the board, getting units going wide, getting something set up for something like a turn 6 Genevieve, which we're going to see the attack token on the side of Shanghai on turn 6. And it's just not going to feel as good. We might get a Grizzled Ranger down, and then the next turn, a Genevieve, or we get a Radiant Guardian that gets procced with one of these blocks, and then a Genevieve next turn. But it's just not nearly as good as it could have been if that turn was not floated.
We're eyeing this Solari Soldier, and I think this is sort of the first turn that we're going to see JO1 comfortable to attack. These Concerted Strikes, man, the fact that it kind of gets through barrier feels so good. And I think you're fine to take that trade of the Concerted Strike for the repost. It is sort of the only defensive spell. It does mean something like a Radiant Guardian can't come down this turn. And maybe Shanghai just doesn't even use the repost. Says, you know what? You've actually got a bad read. I'm not going to use it. Here's a Radiant Guardian instead. Go ahead and try and deal with that one.
Yeah, we do see that Grizzled Ranger, like I figured. That, leaves the 4 mana open for the repost on this. Probably on the Misfortune here to trade with this dragon, but also more importantly save the Misfortune. And like you said, Concerted Strike gonna shut that one down. Man, I can't talk enough about Concerted Strike. Like Radiant Guardian, we were talking about it possibly getting a change with how strong it is, but Concerted Strike equally as powerful as a card, especially in that 5-cost spot, being able to do a lot more damage than a lot of cards at that cost.
And this is going to be really awkward for Shanghai going into the next turn because the Stalking Dragon, or the Screeching Dragon, rather, God, can't remember its name all of a sudden.
Screeching, same adjective, it's fine.
An S-adjective dragon getting the kill here does mean that it will go up to 5 attack, and all of a sudden the Genevieve doesn't get a free trade onto that as well as another unit. You still will be able to gobble up something like the Shield Bearer and then gobble up the Screeching Dragon, but it will probably get a Concerted Strike out onto the Genevieve next turn as well. Just having 2 copies of this card for JO1 is probably all he really needed to take over the game, or we could even see Leona come out in response to the Genevieve just to stun her out. JO1's got all the answers at the moment.
And we do see the repost come out. And we will probably see a pretty snap decision on that Concerted Strike to make sure that this misfortune is going to get taken care of here. Also has the second follow-up Concerted Strike too, so it'll be interesting to see how that gets utilized a little bit later. But having both of those Concerted Strikes early, especially in this A-Soul deck in this particular matchup, is really, really big. I mean, any big threats that come down will pretty much instantly get removed. We see a lot of, speaking of big threats, there's a fleet of what do we call 3 Genevieves? A squad?
A sleepover.
It's a sleepover. We have a sleepover of Genevieves in hand, and I don't know if that's that great right now, though, again, just because, you know, we're only on 4 units. A lot of times at this point in the game, the Scouts deck here is probably going to have another unit on board to really utilize that Genevieve. And speaking of non-impactful stuns from Leona's, that one actually super impactful. It's probably one of the best units in the game that you could possibly stun on an attack turn.
Yeah, and if JO1 wants to, he can level the Leona this turn, though. Without Ravoon, I don't feel like a level Leona is super impactful, and that's why I've never been a big fan of her as a splash champion like we see her in this deck, because there's definitely not a Ravoon in this deck. And you're just kind of playing her as a big Arachnoid sentry at that part. And that's not bad. She does get a lot of value with your Demacia package, like single combat. You know, having that big butt and a pretty critical attack breakpoint when she's leveled does mean that she'll be able to take out most of the things and survive it. But it does just feel a little bit awkward most of the time. And I guess the value she generates is enough. Kind of like how we would always see Fiora and Draven sneak into a lot of Demacia and Noxus decks, not necessarily for any other reason than they are just the best unit in that slot. And maybe aside from Grizzled Ranger, Leona is just the best 4-drop, and they felt like that was a turn that they needed covered a little bit better.
We do see the Solari Priestess coming out. We'll see what Celestial ends up getting invoked here on the side of JO1. And we also, I mean, both of us kind of getting proven wrong from what we were talking about earlier. So we were mentioning that Leona not really making too much of an impact. I'm not really sure she's winning the game per se for JO1 here, but seeing 2 things happen: a huge attack turn get shut down by her stun, as well as a level up now.
I mean, so let's say that Leona was a Lux, right?
Okay.
JO1 was sitting on a 5/6 Screeching Dragon, so the Genevieve couldn't actually kill that. So okay. It would have had to eat up the rest of the board. The Screeching Dragon, you know, blocks something else, because I don't think you're only attacking with the Genevieve. Goes up to a 6/2, gets to kill the Genevieve next turn, and then I have Lux Concerted Strike Remembrance.
Listen, like I said, it's not winning the game. I mean, Lux almost always is going to be better, but I think, I don't know. I mean, because then there's something that you can't really put a quantitative value on, and I think that's tempo, right? It's like, how much of an impact does that tempo swing make for JO1 with the Leona?
In this particular game, it would have been better as a Lux, but, you know, what if it was an Aurelion Soul instead? Or, I mean, I guess you could make the argument you go 2 A-Soul, 1 Leona, 2 and 3 Lux, and then that's either a Leona or a Lux. But I do think in this particular hand, it would have been fine as a Lux. And as you mentioned, the Leona's not winning the game. Lux would have.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too. I don't think we've seen any iterations with 1 Leona, and that might be the route to go, just from what we're seeing of the use case of Leona thus far.
I think we did yesterday, actually. I thought we saw a 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Okay. If that's the case, a 1, 2, 3 is probably how I'd like to see it played, too, because I am still a huge proponent of, if you are playing less Aurelion Souls than your mirror match Aurelion Soul, especially in this tournament with everybody playing Aurelion Soul, then you're at a disadvantage. I think you need that 3rd one.
The 3 was Lux. It was 1 Leona, 2 A-Soul, 3 Lux.
Oh, it's 3 Lux, not A-Soul.
Yeah.
See, it's really interesting. We have seen, I think there was one person playing 3 A-Soul then, if that one, the one you're thinking of.
There have been a couple 2 Luxes, or there have been a couple 3 Luxes, 3 A-Souls, but outside of that, if we see Leona in the deck, I don't think we're seeing 3 Aurelion Soul.
Well, I'm curious to see what we see in this semi, the next semi, and the actual finals, too, as far as to what the actual lineups with the A-Souls are. Are we seeing primarily the 2/2/2s, or are we seeing some other combination of those champions?
Yeah, we'll kind of have to keep track of that, because if Team Shanghigh does make it to the finals here, they are playing Mobilized Dragons instead of Lux A-Soul, or if JO1's team makes it in, we do know that they've got the 2/2/2 split. Curious to see what the other side of the bracket has brought into day number 3. Here we're going to see the Concerted Strike to take out the Genevieve. And Concerted Strike, when it's good, my god is it good, especially with this Screeching Dragon now up to a 7/5. Going to be able to challenge anything on the board of Shanghai and survive.
Yeah, that is a big deal, especially now with everything losing the buff. So that board doesn't look nearly as frightening without that Genevieve buff. And this Screeching Dragon just doing work on this
When
board.
was the last time we saw a player get down 3 copies of Genevieve on all 3 attack turns, 6, 8, and 10, and then lose the game? Because that's what Shanghai looks like he's going to do.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I think it all started at the beginning of the game with that loss in tempo. I mean, if you kind of go through the last few turns in this matchup, JO1 for the type of deck he's playing has had better board presence and better tempo than Shanghai the entire game. And literally the whole entire point of scouts is to have better tempo than your opponent and rush them down before they can do anything about it. And it's like the exact reverse thing happening right now.
And that's why I love this Lux Aurelion Soul deck so much. It feels like it's got a lot of its areas kind of shored up. The Solaris really let you fight for that early board against something even like the Scout deck that is supposed to be sort of the best deck in the game at doing that. I'm curious to see if we're going to trade this Screeching Dragon for the Radiant Guardian or if we're going to fire off the Star Shaping to heal it back up.
Yeah, actually, I'm interested to see that as well. I mean, not getting a whole ton of value if you use the Star Shaping, but I don't think you're really ever needing to use it on face at this point. Like, I feel like investing in your board is probably smarter than your health, which is not something you hear often in a matchup like this or in some sort of like aggro matchup with this Aurelion Soul deck. You usually want to preserve your health total, but there's so much control on the side of JO1. It just seems to make sense here.
Looks like he is going to just kind of offer that one up, say, I don't actually want to use the Star Shaping. He does have the Radiant Guardian to get down after the fact, so I do kind of like this play. We're putting a little bit of pressure onto the life total of Shanghai as well, now down to 13, although I think he was at 12 before, so we actually healed him up a little bit, but we got his Radiant Guardian taken care of before the Genevieve could come down and make that a real threat.
Yeah, to me, that was, I think, just like the safer route, right? Like, if you now still have the Star Shaping on like backup if something really, really, really goes wrong with your life total, which I highly doubt that's going to be the case here. But we are going to see, though, another pretty big turn come out on the side of Shanghai with, like you said, Genevieve number 3 finishing out this sleepover here. And we'll see if she's able to get anything done on this board because this is a pretty big board. I mean, this Radiant Guardian can trade with everything, thanks to Tough. They can also trade with the Genevieve, so Genevieve not going to be able to remove that one. Riposte, though, might change that, so we might end up using the Riposte. But, like, if you look at just the resources available, this is terrible for the Scout deck. Like, they have 2 cards in hand. Like, this is bad.
Yeah, the Riposte is probably going to be the difference maker here. Will let you take out that Radiant Guardian as well as something else. You could probably even take out the Radiant Guardian and the Leona this turn. Not a lot of reaction left on the side of JO1. And I think rather than the Grizzled Ranger, I might have even preferred to see the Star Shaping come down and see, what 7 or 8 cost spell we could get out of that.
Yeah, but even with this Riposte, I just don't really see a whole lot getting done here. Like, you're going to lose your Genevieve. Sure, it's a really good trade for the Genevieve. I mean, getting rid of a Radiant Guardian and Leona feels super, super good. But then, okay, now you have the rest of your board attacking. The Badger Bear will be able to trade with the Cythria pretty well. The Grizzled Ranger will be able to trade with the Brightsteel Protector. And you're really not going to be taking that much damage on the side of JO1. Even if you take both Loyal Badger Bears to the face, you can heal up with a Star Shaping. So there's just, I think this is kind of the last push on the side of Shanghai. And for a last push, doesn't really get anything done.
No, I mean, your Grizzled Rangers do get to, or your Badger Bears do get to go in for a lot of damage. I mean, JO1 doesn't want to lose too much of the board, or he doesn't get an ASOL level up. Although, I mean, his remembrances are down to 1 mana apiece if he blocks with everything. I believe they're down to 0 if he blocks with everything. And that does mean that the ASOL will be able to level next turn, but you'll only be left with this Star Shaping. I'm not sure if you actually survive. I'm pretty sure JO1 survives and is totally fine. Not as much of the board is going to survive on the side of Shanghai as he really needs it to, especially given that JO1 is still going to have 2 Badger Bears. I think we're going to see both Remembrances fired off, and that does mean, we're actually going to start off with the Star Shaping.
Oh, wait, hold on. Why did I think he'd lose his Genevieve? What did he play besides the Riposte?
The Brightsteel Protector.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So yeah, he double battered.
Even if he didn't, Genevieve would have lived with 1.
Yeah, after hitting the Leona. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought the Genevieve would die, but so it's definitely a much better position for Shanghai to be in. But Still, I mean, we see. Okay, well, that sucks.
Yeah, like
Radiant
this is what I was.
Guardian.
The double remembrance into the Aurelion Soul is just going to be too much, and
Yeah.
even getting two tough units out of the remembrances means that Shanghai has no effective blockers because he wasn't able to get this Bannerman down
Oh, that
before
feels
these
so
went
bad.
in, and that does not feel great. Can block a Badger Bear, can eat the other Badger Bear, take the 10 damage. JO1 goes up to 20, has a full board, gets to play Aurelion Soul, which will level up into a Living Legends, as well as having this star shaping on backup. Third Concerted Strike was probably the best card in the deck to top deck, but this is a pretty close second.
I'd say the only thing that feels worse than missing a Bannerman is not being able to play it because your opponent has priority when like you have a super wide field and then you have to trade a bunch of your units. You know, still Shanghai's still able to keep, you know, the Badger Bears, the Genevieve, but like now they have a lot less health. You know, the Genevieve will be able to trade at least with one of these tough units, but yeah, things not looking good on the side of Shanghai here.
And yeah, okay, so we open with the War Chef to get maximum Bannerman value, and I do think that this means
Yeah.
Cosmic Rays is going to come down, clear out everything except the Genevieve.
Wow.
And this is a problem you run into a lot when you try to play any kind of mid-range deck, is if you play against something like Aurelion Soul or Deep, and you're staring down either the A Soul or like a 13/13 tough Nautilus, you're just like, how do I get through this?
Yeah, this is look at, and suddenly there's a lot of cards in one hand and a lot of nothing in the other. And this is what a typical Aurelion Soul victory will look like, even getting the Great Beyond on the field with the sisters, because why not? That's what we do here in Korea. We play everything we can just to show you how much you lost the game.
Even hits two messengers so he gets to refuel into real cards.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You trying to tell me Celestial cards aren't real cards?
Well, they're going away at the end of the turn.
Oh, man.
Okay, yeah, just please open attack. JO1, put this man...
Just do it.
Just put him out of his misery.
Still, you know, still not seeing a surrender come out. We only saw one surrender the entire day yesterday. So, or the entire first 2 days, actually. So, wow. So JO1 going to take it there.
So we've got Pirate Aggro on the side of Shanghai, and then I'm curious to see if JO1, if this is a different Ezreal deck, or if he has actually picked up the mantle of the Draven Ezreal.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens here with and we get
It's Draven Ezreal.
Yeah, it's Draven Ezreal. And Draven Ezreal with, we mentioned this yesterday too, with Captain Farron in it, with that high-end extra reach there with the decimates, because who doesn't like a 5-mana deal 6 damage to face?
Okay, so I'm looking at JO1's hand, and it's looking like 420 or like 480p quality, and then like Shanghai's hand is in 4K.
Yeah, it's pretty it's pretty bad on the side of JL1, but we'll see if that gives Shanghai the advantage. He can see his cards a little bit better. But we have Mystic Shot coming down on the Grenadier. I do think I got to give the advantage to JO1 in this matchup. I think he's going to have a lot of tools to just deal with anything that Shanghai throws down here in this Pirate Aggro deck.
I mean, I feel like aggro decks are supposed to be able to beat Ezreal most of the time. We are going to see the Draven come down here. I'm not sure that Draven Ezreal fights for the board as well as something like the Twisted Fate Ezreal did. We're not seeing a whole lot of units. Obviously, House Spider's good. It's no Petty Officer, but, you know, it's okay, I guess. But don't even see that. Instead, there's going to be Draven coming down, getting a little bit of an immediate advantage. I do like that he's got, you know, the Static Shock. If we see a Misfortune come out here, we could either see the Calling Strike straight away onto her, or we could see the Static Shock onto the Precious Pet and the MF, then the Flock follow-up once we go into combat, block with the Petty Officer. And, I mean, JO1's done a good job of handling the units so far, and while they typically only play 9 spells, I feel like we constantly see this Pirate aggro get that Demacia problem where you just overload on every spell in your deck, and these Demolitionists require you to have more units than you do to get value.
Yeah, and even, you know, JO1 going back in his seat there a little bit, you know, having to line up a block like Draven onto the Petty Officer feels absolutely terrible. I mean, on the bright side, you do have a Static Shock to deal with this Precious Pet pretty soon. What I will say is the hand on the side of Shanghai, he's got a... Oh, that's a rough hand. That is really, really rough. The The two decimates, I mean, he might be able to get there with there not being really any healing on the side of JO1. He does have 4. Let's see. There's going to be 2, 4, 6, 10. There's 14, 15 damage in hand. Like, he almost is within range of game. But this Static Shock shutting down in Imperial Demolitionist here on one of the only targets for Imperial Demolitionist is going to feel really bad for Shanghigh.
And then if he goes for a follow-up Demolitionist, JO1 can actually play the Flock to deny that one as well. Things just working out really well for him.
Yep, and here's the other Demolitionist that Shanghigh is basically forced into right now. And we're going to see another Demolitionist taking care of... Man, this hand is got to be one of the worst aggro burn type hands I've ever seen in a tournament.
It's strange. I feel like this Pirate aggro deck has been really prioritized by the players in this tournament and has just been hard underperforming thus far. You know, we did see one of them bring a TF Swain deck to play that Noxus Bilgewater combination instead, and it worked out extremely well for them. I think it was even JO1's team that did it, if I remember correctly. But yeah, this Pirate aggro, man, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I mean, is it because people just like want pirate aggro to be a thing? Like, it's just...
I don't think so. I don't think you come to a tournament like this like, oh yeah,
I will make this work.
We've seen some off-meta stuff. We are seeing this Draven Ezreal now for the 3rd time this tournament out of the same team. We did see Prankster Burn yesterday pick up a win as well. Jack the Winner should be a good stabilization tool for Shanghigh. Gangplank actually would have been pretty bad, as we're pretty far off of leveling that one. But Jack going to get this continuous value.
Jack the Winner actually is really good here to kind of save Shanghai's butt, because if we look at the hand of JO1-2, there's no Thermo Beam or anything to actually deal with this Jack the Winner on the field. And can I just say, I am really, really kind of like, I can't deal with the fact that this card is named Jack the Winner and not Jack the Ripper. Like, I will make that mistake until, like, this game. There will be 10 sets from now, and I will still want to call this card Jack the Ripper.
I have another name that I want to call him, but in the meantime, Draven going to come down on the side of JO1. Jack the Winner still going to be stunned. I mean, so the Sleep with the Fishes comes out. Mm-hmm. Where do you put this?
I don't see why you put it anywhere other than the Demolitionist. But the Static Shock would then kill the Demolitionist and not really give you a lot of good targets for the other Demolitionist in hand. But then we also see the Thermo Beam. So if you're playing around Thermo Beam, maybe you just do it on your Jack the Winner here, just to...
I don't think you can ever do it on Jack because your opponent is playing Ravenous Flock and Noxian Guillotine. I think this is just a really awkward matchup for the Sleep with the Fishes, and maybe JO1 had the read that Shanghai was going to bust out the Pirate aggro and decided that maybe they brought Draven Ezreal as a counter to these more aggressive decks.
Well, Saboteur coming out. Mainly to pass priority back over to JO1, usually when you see a 1-drop come out during this point in the turn. And it looks like JO1 is considering just taking the attack here first. Will probably... So it's weird, like you want to spend mana to use this Thermo Beam more effectively, but you also can't really... There's nothing in hand that you can actually spend that will keep the Thermo Beam active for Jack the Winner. So I guess the question is, how much do we really want to prioritize getting rid of this Jack the Winner here?
So if you do something like attack with the Draven and Shanghai lines up a block with Jack the Winner, sure, you can go Static Shock and double axe, discard your other axe, and probably Progress Day. But if there's a Noxian Fervor in the hand of Shanghai, you lose a lot of resources trying to kill this Jack the Winner just to lose your Draven by having something like the Demolitionist kill it. And I think it is smart to hold it back. We obviously don't see the answers in Shanghai's hand, but JO1 doesn't know that, and I think that it is correct to go ahead and not attack just because you do lose so much to a Fervor, and it's going to be such a big commitment. I think we are just setting up for, you know, the potential Thermo Beam onto Jack still wouldn't be enough to kill him given what we have actually committed to the board at this point. But we are in a position where, you know, there's no good Sleep with the Fishes target, and we are getting down Captain Pharaon next turn.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, at this point, JO1 has just come to the reservation of, all right, Jack the Winner is going to stick around until at least next turn. It is what it is. Maybe I'll be able to, you know, manipulate my mana a little bit better then. But the Culling Strike at least going to come down to negate. Jesus, we've seen all 3 Imperial Demolitionists come down. I don't think a single one has actually gotten the effect off.
They have not.
That feels
You
really
were talking
bad.
about how there's 15 damage in the hand of Shanghai, and so far he has managed to deal 0 of it.
So this feels like a okay sleep with the fishes. It does deal 2 damage. We're getting there. We do have another 8 in hand, and we'll get another sleep with the fishes. So that will be 10 damage total. It's not out of the realm of possibility for Shanghai to make some sort of comeback here, but it's going to be really, really difficult.
Yeah, and that's just kind of what Decimate does. You've dealt a little bit of damage over the course of the game. Okay, now you have Decimate. If we had seen another Decimate off the top for Shanghai, I think he would actually win the game between
Yep.
this second Decimate and the Sleep with the Fishes. And, while Jack is a little hesitant to play the Sleep with the Fishes on himself, if I do get you down to a low enough life total, the fact that I open him up to a flock doesn't matter if I get to kill you in response to it. So we are going to have to see the Captain Pharaon, I believe, come down here out of JO1. You could go for Progress Day, but I think with it being your opponent's attack turn, you want a more effective blocker for that Jack the Winner.
Yeah, and I think you are required to remove Jack the Winner now. Like, you actually cannot let this stick around. If Shanghai gets another sleep with the fishes, that's just game over. So I do imagine we will see the Thermo Beam come down. Cause I don't. Do you ever attack with Jack the Winner?
Into this board?
I feel like
maybe. Probably not. I don't think I really want to push damage onto him and open him up to a flock.
that's
That's
what I'm
why we
thinking.
haven't
Yeah.
played the Jack. That's why we haven't played the Sleep with the Fishes on him just yet.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking is, you do open yourself up to the flock if you go that route. So you might just keep it back to say, all right, maybe I can get myself another sleep with the fishes here after I play this one. We do see the flock come down. Means if we do see another sleep with the fishes, it's going to have to be on Jack the Winner. So I imagine at this point we see the Thermo Beam come down.
Yeah, Jack
Yep.
is not going to survive the turn, but there's only going to be 3 life left on the side of JO1 after this Decimate comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Though I don't think there's... I mean, so there's Noxian Fervor, but without any units, that doesn't get it done. It would have to be a top deck of the 3rd Decimate, but JO1 has lethal with the Captain Pharaon?
Well, not if there's Decimate drawn, and that is definitely not a Decimate. Yeah, Captain Pharaon will get it done by the next turn, but wait, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, he's 1 short with just attacking.
But he has the axe.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well, not technically the Precious Pet can still block.
Yeah,
so.
the Precious Pet comes down, so that does change things a little bit, but it does still mean that we have to see Decimate off the top for Shanghai. I thought the Captain Pharaon would be enough to sort of say, okay, you have 1 less turn to do it, but of course, there are only 3 spells in this deck out of Shanghai. It is just Noxian Fervor, Decimate, and Make It Rain, so it was pretty likely that he was going to top deck a blocker here. I guess the important part is that you do need to use it as a blocker, because even if this puts you down to 1, I still think you would hold back the Precious Pet to give yourself the option of the Noxian Fervor top deck. Now that is also off the table. It has to be exactly Decimate.
Yeah, it's the only thing that's gonna give Shanghai the chance to win here. We'll see if he draws it. Here we go. What shall it be? That is not a Decimate.
No, Decimate sends you to the finals. Anything else does not, and that does mean that JO1 is going to tie up the series, picking up 2 wins for his team so far.
If only we had like a burst speed delinquent duo in this game, then he would have won.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, let's see if I remember this card correctly. Delinquent duo, and that is going to be JO1.
So JO1 has managed to pick up 2 wins for his team, has started the reverse sweep comeback. We are now in game number 5, Frozen Winter versus Runetelling. These 2 players did not play earlier in this match. Does mean that this will be their first time meeting each other here. And it's all on the table, and it's going to be Scouts versus Bald Eagle. Or it's more Harrowing Anivia. It's not quite Bald Eagle. I don't know, man. There are slight differences between the Braum Anivia deck and then the just Anivia deck, but I do think the lack of Braum really doesn't help you in this Scout matchup.
Well, I was also going to say, I don't think the lack of Braum helps you get that tag Bald Eagle, because you don't have a Bald
Yeah, it really doesn't.
So, but yep, we do have Anivia Harrowing. This deck has been around for quite some time, actually, probably since the inception of the game in the early days of beta. Still strong, still a decent deck. Anivia always a great late game threat, so we'll see how a very late game threat or based deck is actually going to deal with something like this Scout aggro heavy deck.
And missing turn 2 for Runetelling is actually going to play against him a lot. If a War Chef had come down here, the pressure would really be on, but instead, it's going to be a pretty weak 4 attack turn on turn 3 that, I mean, Frozen Winter is pretty much just going to negate entirely with this Catalyst of Aeons and is now very close to getting the Anivia down.
And yep, we're going to see the Fleet Feather Tracker possibly, or the Grizzled Ranger. We'll see what Runetelling decides to go with next here. Actually, a lot of options. I mean, even the Misfortune, you could go into your next turn with a Misfortune being able to attack here. The problem with playing Misfortune in this deck is you got to assume your opponent probably has some sort of removal. I imagine Grasp of the Undying is a card that Frozen Winter is playing. We don't have access to the deck list, but I don't see why it would not be in here. And there it is. My question is answered.
All right, so now we've got a couple of questions. Do you go for this Withering Wail to try and stall worth the damage? Do you just let all of this go and fire off the Ruination post-combat? Do you Vengeance the Misfortune? What are we going for here, Frozen Winter? You've got a couple of options available to you. Maybe you even just get down the Anivia and go for that next turn, in which case I think you are going to go for something like a Grasp or a Whale here, get the Anivia down, clean up the rest of the board. We'll have to see. I don't think we're going to see the Ruination this turn, and I think that it was smart on the side of Runetelling to not get the Scout down first, try to get a little greedy with that. It's really enticing to get the Scout down next to the Misfortune, but when your opponent is a turn ahead of you, you have to respect that Ruination.
And so it looks like he's going to go with the Grasp here, but I was kind of thinking, I mean, we see that there's no Bannerman on the side of Runetelling. So to me, this is actually the correct play. But if you are in the side of Frozen Winter, I think you do have to play around a Bannerman, which is why I think you would actually have to play the Withering Wail just to kind of mitigate how many units your opponent has on the field to get a successful Bannerman off.
I think you just want to further your argument of Ranger's Resolve being the best one-cost spell in the game, and you wanted to see Withering Wail get denied by a one-cost spell.
That would have been nice. That is some insane value. That is exactly why that card I feel is busted. Oh my god.
I don't think he's going to be too worried about, even if something like a Bannerman were to come out here, you've got Anivia into the Withering Wail on the following turn, and that will still go ahead and clean up all of these, Fleet Feather Trackers. Doesn't even pick up the Avalanche now, and I don't think it's out of the question to play the Avalanche here and then go for the Anivia attack next turn.
I don't know. This is going to be close, though. This is going to be difficult for Frozen Winter to navigate. I mean, he's already at 6 going into turn 7, and, I mean, he has very little wiggle room as far as what cards he can and can't play, because he does need to probably hold 5 mana open for that Withering Wail on a following turn. Withering Wail feels like it gets a lot of value here, but like you said, Ranger's Resolve would shut that down. So I feel like Avalanche almost has to be played, but we do also have the mana for Ruination. Problem is 6 mana. There'll probably be redevelopment on the side of Runetelling, being able to summon, we can see anyways, a War Chefs and a Grizzled Ranger after the fact. And we do see the Avalanche.
See, I don't really like this. I would have preferred the Avalanche last turn, just because we did have the 4 mana available. Yeah. Now we banked the 3 mana. That was basically a 5 mana Avalanche, and that 1 mana can make all the difference. Although I do like the idea of baiting out the Ranger's Resolve on this turn and then having the Whale next turn, because your opponent, especially when this Grizzled Ranger comes down, that they're going to have to Ranger's Resolve.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that 1 mana too, right? Like it doesn't feel like it matters or is too impactful to just waste 1 whole mana, but in this particular matchup as the control player, you need to use every little bit of mana as efficiently as possible. So that 1 mana might be a huge deal in the next few turns here.
I mean, for example, that 1 mana is the difference between Ruination being online and not being online on the next turn. Granted, I think we're always going to see the Withering Wail next turn, so that's not the biggest thing in the world, but it could have been. It could have been a big difference maker.
And if we do see the Ranger's Resolve, too many R's there, come out here, we will probably still see a block on this Anivia, and then the Anivia can actually be killed with a Make It Rain. I'm not sure if Runetelling is going to go that route, but that would likely force a block out of the Anivia on the following attack turn. I don't know if he cares that much, though, about killing the Anivia.
Yeah, I don't think you really want to block the Anivia with either of your 3 attack units, because then you are actually losing them. I could see a block with the War Chef, but overall, I think you're more concerned about preserving the health of your units than pushing damage back onto this Anivia, or even preserving your own life total. It's not like there's going to be a win snuck out of Frozen Winter here. It's going to be a very honest one of, hey, I have complete control of the board. There's nothing you can do about that because you're playing a Demacia deck.
Yeah, and it looks like Runetelling is going to go and agree with you there. Not going to assign any blocks, but will save the units with Ranger's Resolve, which does make Frozen Winter feel a little bit better about potentially playing this Withering Wail now. That card is very much online and will definitely help him in this next turn kill 2 of these units off if Runetelling decides to go in for a full attack here, and then the Anivia can block either the Laurent Protege or the War Chefs here as the other units.
Do you go for the Scout attack here?
Ooh, that's a tough one, huh?
There's no Ruination online for Frozen Winter, so that's sort of the big punish off the table, and it looks like we're just not going to go for it. We are going to see the lethal and say, you know what, I actually just want to take this.
Oh.
I think the Scout attack does have things that it plays around. For example, if there was another Anivia in Frozen Winter's hand, the Harsh Winds does actually not pair as well if we go for the Scout attack, just because we do get that extra 1 damage from the Misfortune, but immediately we want that War Chef value, buffing up the Misfortune outside of the range of a Withering Wail.
Yep. Yeah, so the Misfortune will go ahead and live here thanks to the War Chefs. And this Withering Wail, thanks to the Withering Wail, Frozen Winter barely skates through with his life here. Actually, 1 off of lethal because the Make It Rain could have potentially done some damage here as well. So going to go down to 2 life on the side of Frozen Winter. We'll see if... I mean, we're 2 turns away from 10, and unfortunately, turn 10... as of now, is going to be the attack. Actually, yeah. It's going to be the attack token on the side of Runetelling.
So I'm a little confused by the Grizzled Ranger getting played there, just because we are going to into my opponent's attack turn. They have an Anivia. I thought once the Ranger came down, I thought we were going to see Make It Rain into single combat on the egg, or even just Make It Rain to stop the Anivia from completely wiping my board.
Yeah, that...
I don't know. I feel like this might have been a misstep from Runetelling and one that could potentially cost him the game.
Yeah, I mean, unless he's thinking, okay, on turn 10, I'm just going to go in with an attack with all my units, but and that way he could... Yeah, but then you would have played... Well, he didn't know he had the Genevieve yet. I was going to say then you'd have to play the Genevieve anyways, which means you can't open attack. So it does feel awkward that the Grizzled Ranger was played. I
mean, I guess you're not going for a Scout attack on turn 10. And you do just want to get down your Misfortune as well as whatever unit you top deck. Just a little unfortunate for Runetelling that it is just outside of the mana range that he actually does get to play in. So yeah, I mean, I guess the Grizzled Ranger makes a little bit more sense than I gave it credit for, understanding that you're not going for the Scout attack. You just want the 3 attack on board. If we see a pass out of Runetelling here, that will confuse me.
I mean, I don't think you ever... I mean... I guess you're technically worried about something like a Vengeance or whatever, just killing your units, or even a Ruination. But yeah, okay, there's the pass.
Do we... I was wondering, do we ever see Glimpse Beyond into Rekindler on the side of Shanghigh? Or not Shanghigh, sorry, Frozen Winter.
Ooh. I don't know, because does that win... You're going to get 3 blockers if that's the case. If you see it now... Your opponent can summon a unit, though, which is the issue. All right, then you have the Vengeance next turn for backup. So that actually
if my opponent summons a unit now, then I can Ruination and then Vengeance whatever they attack with next turn, assuming that they're down to, X amount of units.
Could also just... Well, Ruination here feels bad because your opponent can redevelop. Glimpse Beyond might actually be the right play, and I think Frozen Winter is possibly agreeing with you. Yep. And... do we see the single... I don't think this matters enough.
I feel like we have to. What value are we ever getting out of single combat other than denying 2 draws for our opponent?
And I guess, next turn is just the turn, right? Next turn is just where this game is either won or lost on the side of Runetelling, right?
I guess it's actually better to just single combat the egg after the fact. Actually take the unit off the table.
There's something I gotta say about playing against Anivia, and it's I always feel like I want to get rid of the Anivias to mitigate the Anivia damage that's gonna come through, but it always feels like such a waste because more Anivias just come down. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that other Anivia turning into a Harsh Winds is gonna be really, really big for Frozen Winter.
Yeah, don't know with that Harsh Winds if Runetelling can actually put this away now, because it's going to completely shut down this next turn attack.
I mean, depending on what is actually played by Frozen Winter next turn, I think the fact that he can play Harsh Winds and Vengeance does mean this one's going to be all, but sealed up, signed, delivered. Because I think that the Misfortune with either another Misfortune or a Relentless Pursuit could be enough. Could even just play it, and then the Scout attack might be enough to get it done. There is no actual healing in the hand of Frozen Winter at this moment.
And now thinking about single combat, okay. I guess on...
Yeah, I like single combat onto the egg.
I mean, it's one less blocker, but we know, I mean, with the Harsh Winds and the Vengeance, there's just actually... I'm pretty positive there's no combination of cards that will allow Runetelling to actually get more than one damage through. I mean, because this Misfortune will probably die to a Vengeance anyways.
Well, so if Runetelling top decks a second Misfortune, I'm pretty sure he wins.
Well, no, because then he just plays the
because
Misfortune and gets a Vengeance, right?
Yeah, so you play the Misfortune, that gets a Vengeance. You play the second Misfortune. Now I have two attacks because I have the Scout, and you only have a Harsh Winds mana left.
Okay.
Which doesn't matter because I don't actually need to hit you with the Genevieve. I just need to attack with it.
Okay.
Relentless Pursuit, not going to get it done. I think it has to be exactly the third copy of Misfortune.
Yeah, I was thinking,
which
when you
is
originally said that, I was
not
thinking
enough.
like Misfortunes Make It Rain maybe for like the game or something like that, but no, I think you're right. That would bait out the Vengeance, so you get another one down. So I think that's about just the only top deck that we're waiting on here from Runetelling for him to potentially get out of this.
I know that we used to talk a lot about limbo and these situations where the game is over but hasn't quite ended yet. And I feel like since the release of Call of the Mountain, we've been seeing a lot less limbos. These games feel a lot more close. There are nail-biter top decks that could come out of either player to get it done. And if we actually play this... It looks like we are going for the Avaros and Sentry, and that does mean that Vengeance Harsh Winds is not on the table for the next turn.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting. That might be a little bit... I think he just put his head into his hands. I don't know if he's just now realizing that, but... Because you want... Like, Avaros and Sentry is basically one blocker. It negates one attack, and Vengeance does the same thing. Harsh Winds gets 2 off the board, so you're better off probably with the Vengeance, and wow... So now that the Sentry has come down, this Misfortune and Bannerman, this might be a thing.
I mean, so if you play Misfortune, then Frozen Winter can Ruination. And then whatever your last unit is, unless it is specifically a Scout, it's just going to get blocked out by my Anivia, and you're not going to win the game. And then I have the potential to start coming back next turn, especially with this Harrowing that I have in hand. Frozen Winter just needs to find a way to survive the turn.
That seemed like way too quick of an attack on the side of Runetelling. I feel like you used the Scout attack there. I feel like you want to try to get value off the Genevieve and force your opponent to play something first.
I think he is a little bit too afraid of the Harrowing, but or the Ruination rather. But yeah, even if you are afraid of the Ruination, then I still think you go for the Scout attack onto the Anivia. No matter what, I think there were some lines where Runetelling had a chance to win, and I don't think the open attack was realistically one of them.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a time where you open attack there, so it's kind of disappointing to see Runetelling. I mean, because after, I would call the Avarosian Sentry also kind of like a little bit of a misstep on the side of Frozen Winter. After seeing that, both of mine and your eyes lit up like, oh, well, there's an opening. Now there's no Vengeance and Harsh Winds on the table, and I think Runetelling should have taken advantage of that, but now he's just gonna, he just loses now. He's just
yeah, that's a few too many Anivias for any mortal man to handle.
He's just dead. So there's going to be a lot of damage coming out. That's 6 damage off the Anivia effects, not to mention the actual attacks themselves. And there's realistically no way, I think, for this Misfortune to trigger twice either, which is kind of the only way he's going to be able to get this win condition. Is there a way to keep...
Does Runetelling know that his Genevieve is still going to die, even with the barrier? I guess he was just trying to get out more blockers. But with the board he had available to him, the Genevieve and the Bannerman, he was still living at 1.
Yeah, and I'm trying to. I was trying to think if there was a way for like the Genevieve to somehow live for a Scout unit with Misfortune, but then Misfortune also.
Oh no, sorry, he was going to die if he didn't play that.
If he didn't play
that's my bad. If he didn't play a blocker. I done my math a little bit wrong.
A little heal for good measure on the side of Frozen Winter, but Not needed. Looks like Frozen Winter is going to go ahead and take this game. Wow, he actually dies with this. Okay, I think is he just blocking correctly? Wait.
Yeah, no, so what he did was he overwrote the Avarice and Sentry with the Tavern Keeper
Oh,
so that he
gotcha.
had that one
Okay,
extra damage.
yep. Yeah, and that's going to do it. Frozen Winter going to take game 5 here, giving his team the victory versus Runetelling with the Anivia deck, the Anivia Harrowing deck. So another spicy, different deck from what we're used to.
We haven't seen Frozen Winter touch a meta deck yet. This man has only played Harrowing Anivia and Draven Ezreal.
that's